Okay, so we're looking very, very posh. Just pop this tail wheel out. Just slide round, we'll be okay. Have to have a bit of a play with pulling this tail down because it should just slide and doesn't want to, so I'm not going to force it at the moment. Anyway, so 2 coats of Johnson's Clear been on here, so you could use that bottle, or as I say, the new one does just the same job, just it's a little bit thinner, doesn't cover quite as well as the old one, but it does exactly the same. Just give it 2 or 3 coats of the new stuff versus the old. Okay, so for this one, what we're going to be doing is moving on to the weathering stage of really trying to do, we've obviously done chipping and we're looking quite nice and glossy and things like that, but what we want to do now is really bring out the details of all perhaps the panel lines and things like that. So normally if you used to use a wash, I might turn around and say, right, okay, we're going to do a wash now. Like we got here, here's the dark dirt, and then we'll put the wash over it. But the thing is, because it's on such a dark colour, you're not going to see it. Your other option is obviously to go for a black, okay? You could use a black wash, get in there with the black, and do it like that. But there again, it's not really going to stand out that well. So obviously the other option is to say to go lighter. Okay, so we've got the light wash here, which is nothing wrong with that, and you could use that one, but it might be just a little bit too strong. Okay, so obviously you can mix the washes together to make any shade you want to do, but what I'm actually going to do is use the concrete wash. Okay, the concrete is a grey, it looks a lot lighter than it actually is in the bottle. Okay, so it should come out very, very nicely. So we're going to take a brush, a nice clean brush, and what I'm going to do, because I haven't got any little pots at the moment, is just pour it a little bit in a tray, just like this. Okay, so you can see it down here, and all we'll do is going to brush this on the model. So we'll start on the other side, and all we're going to do is just work it round into all the panel lines. Now I'm not going to go in the wheel wells with it, because we can do that obviously with the darker colour. If it does go in, it's not so much of a problem. But because we've gone over a couple of coats of Johnson's Clear, but they were a higher air pressure, so this is probably the equivalent to sort of a satin finish. Hopefully what it'll do, some of this will stay on the aircraft, get gripped into the panel lines and everything else. Now there is another option to this. We could have come around and airbrush this on to give it an effect. But what we're going to do is we're going to give this one what I call a pigment rub over to really bring the details to life and to give it that sort of warm, grimy, dirty look to the actual aircraft. So as I say, we're avoiding wheel wells and things like that. Right, so we're totally dry now. We've gone off everywhere, and as you can see already it gives it that nice worn down look to it. Now if we wanted to, you could actually airbrush this coat over it, and away you go, to give it that sort of bleached down, toned down effect, and it works great for that. What we're really after though is it to look for the panel lines and things like that. So what we'll do, if I just bring you in a little bit, what we can do now, normal thing, piece of tissue, you've seen me probably do this 100 times before. First of all we'll try it dry, and then if it's getting a little bit sticky, it's not coming off, then we'll go to doing it wet. But basically we'll just give it a rub dry and see what happens. Okay, and it's pretty much coming off just as a dry area, as you can see there. So what I'm going to do is try and do it dry and see how we get on. If we get any sticky bits, then we can try it wet. But because this is over, it's a gloss paint we've used with like a satin finish, so it's actually not too bad. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this as it goes on, but as you can see, now we get the panel lines showing through just like that, and then hopefully as we move through we'll get great detail. But as I say, we're just doing this dry, and what it's doing is up here it's leaving more of this grime in. So we're just going to wet our tissue just a little bit. Okay, give it a rub. Okay, over there, just get it in from all the directions, and this gives us our panel line detail, just like that. And then once this has had a flat coat over the top, which you'll have in a minute, obviously these will stand out a lot more as we go through. So I'm going to carry on now and get the wash off of absolutely everywhere on this model, and then we can come back, see how it's exactly looking, and move on from there. Okay, so the wash is all off now. It's a little bit patchy in places, but hopefully what will happen is once the flat coat goes on in a moment, it will make it a bit more uniform. Now I've distressed a few of the lettering and the things like that, basically just scraping them off with the blade of a knife and picking at them, just to give it that sort of worn and torn look to it, so everything else sort of blends in a little bit more. So okay, what we're going to do now is, we've got some flat coat here. This is neat. To be honest, this is extra acrylic stuff. So we're just pouring it neat into here. Check our flow, and all we're going to do is just give this a light dusty coat all over. Nothing particularly heavy or anything else like that. Just to make sure it's all coming in nicely together. And just to flatten it down and to protect the actual wash that's on there, because in a moment we're going to distress it even further. So we're just popping around like that, cutting to air when it's looking wet, because literally we want to dry this off, but immediately you should see that it's losing that shine to it that this particular one's had throughout the build. And this will protect in everything as well, and hopefully it'll just make it look a lot older. Okay, so now that flat coat is dried there, we're definitely not as shiny as we were. So now what we want to do is just add another layer. Now obviously we've got post shading and things you can do now, but what I want to do is create an overall dulled down, weathered effect to it. So normally you could do this by a couple of ways. You could go around and say post shading, or give it a light coat of something, like a dirty spray, something like that, right the way over it. But I want to be a little bit more specific on where we do the areas and things like that. So what we're going to use for this one is good old pigments. So the first thing to do with pigments is they are extremely messy. So we're just going to pop down here some kitchen roll, some kitchen towel, just down here to catch a lot of it. So okay, what we're going to use a three-way mixture. We're going to use the Flooring Models Dark Dirt. Okay, and we're going to use rust. That's why I've got the lids on the wrong way around here. Okay, so we've got dark dirt, rust, and of course black. Okay, just like so. Now, I've got a little container here just for doing some mixes if we want to mix some together. Now the first thing you want to do is, obviously you could come along and put pigment straight away over the top of this, and it's going to be very subtle, but what I want to do is sort of protect a couple of the little panels on there. Now the reason protecting the panels is just so they look rather less dirty, more new, something like that. Okay, now the trouble is we've got decals on here, we've got multiple layers of paint, so make sure you get most of the glue off. So I'm using a low tack tape like Tamiya tape anyway, and if you just rub it over your hand, your oils on your hand will get rid of most of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick out a panel or two just to do something a little odd with it. So if we do this one here, now they don't have to be perfect. Okay, so what we do, we just pick out this panel here. So as you say, rough torn edges, because we don't want them to be perfect after the panel line. Okay, so we're just going to do one sort of there. Okay, something like that. Okay, and perhaps we'll do this aileron looking newer than perhaps it would do. So I'm going to try and do this one-handed. Okay, something like that. So if we just do this wing for the moment, and perhaps we'll protect a panel or something over that side, but if we do it for the moment. So what we do, we grab our brush, okay, and we're just going to lightly rub this over the wing. Okay, just lightly. What we're doing is we're just not trying to totally ingrain this, but we certainly want it to dig on. Okay. Now what this will do, obviously it will weather up the actual decal itself. So if we bring you in a little bit and bring the camera around here, you can see what we're doing. So obviously what we're doing is brushing backwards, because that's how we want the pigment and the airflow to sort of go. Okay, now it might fill up your panel lines, but that's not a problem. Okay, once you've got most of it off like that, what I do is just very lightly rub it around with my finger just to ingrain it and to get it all on there. And if we very lightly take this one off, you might be able to see a bit of a blow, the type of effect we're going for. So what we've actually done here, we've dulled down that one. You might be able to see the panel above the star. This one here is nice and clean compared to the outside one, and it grinds them up as you go through. So we'll just continue on this wing as we go through. If we angle it sort of like this, you can follow as we go through. Okay, so what we're going to do is take it pretty much down here. Okay, and we're just sort of smoothing it around and then flick it everywhere. Okay, once it's on, a bit of a rub with the finger, and that will just help it sit in the textures. Okay, avoid that front panel. But what it will hopefully do is just give a slight tinge to everything. Okay, as we go through, and just grime up and weather up as we go along, just like so. And I know it's very hard to see on the blue. Now we're picking out bits of black. Okay, we're just going to do some little spots here and there with the black pigment, just so it gives a sort of multi effect as well. So if we just go around with those ones. Now obviously when we come along in a moment, we're going to put a coat over the top of this to seal this in. A lot of this will disappear in, but I'm hoping you'll be able to see in both cases, you'll see the difference, and what we're trying to achieve here will jump out at you as soon as you see it with the other wing, because when you do one wing on its own, it's very hard to see it. When you do two, all of a sudden you think, oh yeah, I get it, you know, it's really looking different. Okay, so that's done like that. Okay, so we're just this panel off. Okay, this is the only trouble. You get it on your hands, you don't want to handle this too much. Okay, and then what we do, obviously we've gone along now. It's really hard to see. It's one of those ones, in daylight, it's absolutely fantastic. But you can see, you might be able to see, you get the difference between the two. And as I said, in photos you'll see it, it will stand out a hell of a lot. On camera, it's not actually that good. In fact, to tell you the truth, utterly rubbish on camera. Okay, so we've been around pretty much everywhere with it. So the couple of things we've done there, we've done this staining going down the side. Now the thing is, this white tape, in reality what that did was stop all the oil and crap and all the bits and pieces and fuel that might be dribbles and things going up into the windscreen and obscuring the view. So they notoriously leak. So a way of getting around that, they used to go along and put tape up the seam of the panel lights. So what we've done now is literally just gone along now and cleaned them up. Now I'm in a bit of a mess going through all of this, but we're basically done now. So I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but what we've actually done now, just by using pigments, we've done some staining down the side. You see it's catching it in the light quite nicely. But we've gone around and done the entire aircraft, and what it does, it also weathers down a lot of the name, the actual markings and things like that, as well as giving depth to things like the tail planes. You know, you might be able to see it. We've done the raised edges are now pretty dirty and everything else. Now the thing with this is, if you overcoat this too heavy now with a spray of your normal sort of your thinners and flat coat and things like that, you might lose a bit of it. So it's better to go overboard and make it look too much than it is too little. Now the thing is, at the moment, for you guys at home, you probably won't see as much of this as I can. To me, this is pretty much covered in it all over and looks quite good. Unfortunately, the camera really doesn't do this at all justice. But what it does, it enables us to pick out panels and give them a clean up, and I've done some black around the engine, black pigment, and just using the different colours to go through and to highlight and accentuate obviously all the different things that are going on, and to really give it sort of a warm down look to it all. But as I said, on the actual film and even on camera, it doesn't show it that well. It's one of those things that the naked eye picks up. But there we go, that's that all done now, looking rather nice. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a check around, make sure we're all happy of how the pigment is and in the right areas and things like that. We're going to blow it all off just to make sure there's no wet pigment on there, and then we're going to give this another flat coat just to knock it back, and then we can start really bringing it all together. Okay, so we've done a little bit of work to this one, because really we're getting into the sort of final steps. So what we've actually done now is totally dry. We installed the gear doors on there, you know, that's pretty straightforward, no problems at all. All we've done though is that there's no holes for them to actually slot into. So what we've actually done is just taken a tiny bit off of the actual hinge system. As it hooks over, we've taken this end bit off so it's flat, so it fits in there nice and comfortable. But they're on now, so's the front ones. The rear ones, it's a funny old angle. They actually hang right out like this, but that is the correct angle. So if you're thinking, hold on, I think it's a little bit bent or something like that, then honestly that isn't how it actually is like that. Now a couple of things, what we've actually done is to go around and do the wheel wells here to give them a wash, give them this sort of grimy colour. What we've actually done, you can see it in there with the light, but they've actually got a little bit of grime on them just to sort of dirty them up a little bit. What we've actually used for that is a little bit of Tamiya Smoke, which is X19. He said, just looking for the bottle, can't find the bottle just offhand, but it's X19, it's a gloss one, and what I did was I thinned it down a little bit with it in a little bit of a cup with some thinners, just to give it that extra sort of look to it, give it a little bit of depth and everything else like that. Now the other thing we can get on with now is the actual gun system. So you might be able to see on this one here, we've done it already. So there's the guns in there. Now I've still got to paint that white pole coming up. Is actually a pole that holds up that door. Okay, it's a bit of metal that folds down inside. But they're in there, as you can see, you've got the ammo belts and everything looking quite nice. So how we did that was, we've got the Browning guns here. So we actually did these in this great stuff. This is the actual metallizer, or Mr. Metal colour. Okay, this is the dark iron. Now the great thing with these is you paint them on, they look quite dull, very, very flat, and you think, well, that's not exactly metally. You give it a rub with your finger and you can actually polish it up and to give it sort of different tones and shades. So when you give it a bit of a rub over, it really, really does come to life. Now the thing you might have to do, I'd say it's quite tricky to show you in here, but if we bring you in nice and close. Okay, get the camera to come in, whoops. Right, there we go. Okay, so the thing is, the holes that the actual guns go through at the front here, they are a little bit tight, so you might want to widen them just a little bit. But basically what happens is, starting with the furthest one out, the guns go in, slide in, and then you've got this square below. Okay, just need to roll this one over. Okay, and then the square they actually pop into. Now what you might have to do, as I did on them, is down on the bottom here, this area, it's like almost like a mismold down the end here. But what I did was, you got this back bit just here, I just trimmed it off a little bit and squared it up. And I found then they go in there a lot better. And obviously even if you have overcut it a bit, it should still fit in there very, very nicely. But basically they go in, and then they take a little bit of moving around, because obviously the back, what happens is this back stop on here goes down through the hole on this end one. Okay, so to slide it all in with the front and then to get the back in as well, just takes a little bit of fiddling about to get it in there. But once it is in, you should find it will drop in to position. Drop a super glue on the front will take care of that. Okay, second one goes in. So pick the ones with the straightest barrels. There again, just give it a pinch, rub like this, and you'll notice already, you can see the front half to the back, it's a lot more shiny. Great stuff, you actually polish it up. Okay, so second one gun goes in, okay, and fits in just like so. Okay, now the third one, when it goes in, this gun section, it's too tight to get it to fit right to the very front. Okay, so what I do, we actually come along with some scissors, and I know it's not authentic, but what we actually do is take the front end of the gun barrel off. Okay, so we're just left with it like this. You can't see it from the other end anyway, okay, but you can then fit this one in, because it is a little bit of a tight fit. And then once you're in, it should all sit in there just like that. So what you can do is just get a bit of super glue and just fix them in nicely. So you can just come along and just drop a little bit down in there. And then if you've got some kicker, this is the vital stuff that doesn't mark, just give it a squirt all over. Bit of a blow. Just to dry all that off, just like that. Job done. Now the next thing is the old ammo. I've got one under here, I feel. So you've actually now got the ammo chutes, which are obviously going to feed right the way over. So obviously you've got the longest one comes along from this top one and goes right the way over. The only thing I did, you've got these little pegs on the end here, which I don't think should be here. Just these little bits on the end, because we want the chutes to come off the end and then go across. So we just trim them out. We'll get those bits out later, because then it'll be an extension of it carrying on in. And then all we do is just, it doesn't lay right the way across, okay, it's just going to go in there. So then if we just grab our tweezers, do a little bit on each end. Okay, so it's on something like that. So the ammo feed goes across and looks like it's dropping in. You'll do the same on the others as well. And then if I just show you, you've got this little photo fret here with this long one. So if we just trim this one off. Okay. Then what we can do, we can just put a little bit of super glue, just run it over the back of the top because you won't see it. Okay, then we've got the gun chute feeder. Hopefully then we'll just go right over the top. Just like that. Okay, so that shows through. And then the other thing you can do, we've got here, I thought I did have one on the go loose, there it is. We've got here, these are the little photo etch parts, resin parts here. These are the top, the actual slam top for the breech of the actual gun. We're going to have ours all in the open position, so just trim these up. I've just literally taken this off of the sprue, so then what happens is you just drop the end in a little bit of super glue. I should have done these first really. Okay, and they're going to fit in once they're in and square, just like so. So the first round's ready to be cranked in and dropped down. So hopefully you can see that. We bring it a little bit closer. That's what we're trying to achieve, just like that. Okay, pretty straightforward. So when you see it with the other one, if we can get the other wing in, that's the type of effect we've gone for. There we go, you can see them hopefully in like that. And there we go, no problem at all. So that shows those in. So I'm going to do the same with the other ones. Then we can look at doing the doors for the tops of this. And then what we've got is a couple more things we've got to take care of. A couple of things we've got to do is a few little bits and pieces broke off when we've been stripping this back and spraying it and things like that. So we're going to have to take care of those. And obviously we've got to touch in the top of that door as well. So I'll just get the guns finished off. Okay then, so done a few little bits more. What we actually did was, got here on the wingtips, you might be able to see, we've done the light work. Okay, so all we've done with these wingtips is literally super glue in there, a little bit of kicker, okay, let it set, because obviously we've got a fibre optic in here as well. Okay, once that's set, then literally all we've done is go along with some red clear paint over the top to take care of the wingtips. We've done the same for the green on the other side. And then it was just a case of feeding the wiring out the bottom, which we've done here. Okay, and then we bite the bullet and we see if we can get this thing to light up. Now we've got to feed this cabling in there a little bit more, but obviously because of this one we've done, well, let's face it, we've had major troubles with it. We were just a little concerned that when we plug it all in, nothing was going to happen. Okay, but I'm happy to report, I'm hoping I'll be able to show you this. If we bring you in here, and bring in, you can probably see, there's the cockpit lights all on in there like that. When you get them at different angles, you can see more of them, but there's the lights done like that. Okay, and then if we come along here, you can see our formation lights on, so we've got the green on that side. Okay, let's be a little bit careful as we turn this around. Running out of places to hold on this now. Okay, and there we have the red light on that side. Okay, and I've done it with the lights off as well, and it really, really does look very nice. Okay, so that's those bits done. And what I did, and I'm very happy to say, they worked an absolute treat. The other thing we've done, whilst we're on closer, you might be able to see, but we've attached all the photo etch latches to all the bays on the side for these panels that are open. So we've done with them with they're open. Now the reason is, you might think, why is that one very nice and blue and this one's kicked in? I've done this one as a replacement panel. It's supposed to look like it's either had a paint job off of another aircraft or a replacement, whereas all the others are all slightly scuffed and everything else like that. So really now we are really cracking on with this one at a great rate. What I've got to do now is, obviously we've got to put the photo etch parts, which I'll just run through myself. It's very straightforward, for the mirrors and the bits and pieces onto the actual handle itself, onto the rear canopy, everything else like that. The front bay doors, obviously they're going to be a loose fit, so these are down here out of the way, so they'll be lying around in diorama form underneath the actual aircraft itself. Now at this point, you know, are we going to put some weapons on it? Are we going to fuel it, everything else? Are we going to put some gun streaks on here? Yes, I will. I'm going to put some little gun streaks in here just with the airbrush and flick them back and do those, but I'm not going to arm it with rockets and everything else, because obviously we have got the cowl off, things like that. The only thing I might do is a couple of the fuel tanks which fit underneath, which go up in here to take care of those. So this wiring now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it very, very neat and run it down. And then, as I say, at the moment we've got a 9-volt battery over here, it's one of the square ones that run in the electrics. Obviously when this goes onto a base for a diorama or something like that, then obviously this can be hidden and we can put an on-off switch to it. At the moment I've literally just got it on some crocodile clips just here for the on and off and things like that. So there we go. I'm really happy with the way this one's working now. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to carry on with the rest of the photo etch bits and pieces like that. Okay, so we're really on the last few stages now. So a couple of things we've done. Obviously we've put in all the lights. We've put on the navigation lights down below, just down here. Let's move the camera up a little bit. So we've got the navigation lights in there. The other couple of things we've done is that you can see underneath here, those exhaust stacks that we had, we've installed them into there and glued them in and painted them. They're going to have a bit of a buff up in a minute. We've installed this plate down here, and we've got a couple of the hooks are installed down here. Now we've got the cabling comes out here at the moment, but we intend to flush that down. And then what we're going to do is have the fuel tanks, which will hide all that anyway. So the other things we've got as well is, moving back here, we've got the rear antenna is put on just down the bottom here as well. So that's really the underside taken care of. So we need to be careful with this cabling at the moment. So the last few bits really to go on this one are going to be the, sorry, just trying to straighten up the camera for you, is the antennae which go on the front and rear, which is a little bit odd way of doing it, but you can see hopefully just down in here, if we move it to this side you might be able to get a better look. So we've got it just down in here, we've got the first one that goes on. Now for these, normally I would use super glue or something like that, but I've got a feeling these are going to take a bit of a knock every now and again. So what we've done is put a drop of extra thin glue on there. Okay, letting that sort of melt in just a little bit, just to really sort of start off. Okay, then what we're going to do, we're going to fit on the actual aerial part onto it. Okay, so we just make sure it's square and everything's okay. So it's going to sit on there just like that. As I said, it's quite an odd one of doing it, but there we go, that's that on. And what we'll do is we'll paint it afterwards. Now we've got another one again that is going to go on the rear one just down here. So it's just on the other side from where you're looking. But again, tiny blob of extra thin. Don't put too much because obviously you don't want it going off and running. Okay, and then what we'll do, we're just going to come along, let it eat in for a couple of seconds just to get going in the paintwork. Okay, and then same thing again, we're just going to come along, fit the aerial, so there again, making sure we're square, making sure it's pointing straight up and not over at an angle. Okay, so just like that, and again, we'll leave it on there to really go off. Now the other bits we've actually taken care of is here. Now I've got to be very careful with this because I've got the start of a crack appearing in it, and I'm not even sure how this crack has actually happened with this one. But if we bring you in nice and close, as you can probably see, right you guys, there we go, we've actually installed photo etch bar inside and we've got the mirrors going on in there as well, but we have got a tiny little crack on the top. Now I gave this a bit of a polish round and everything in there, and it could have happened during that, although I'm usually very careful the way I do it, but it's a nice clean canopy and everything else like that. Whilst you're at that angle, you can probably see down here, some of you were asking in the forum about the actual chipping and effect and everything. When I had the trouble with that salt effect that was sort of bubbling paintwork, I deliberately went back and redid it on the cowl here, so it's got that look of heat bubbling and everything coming through, because obviously when the cowl's obviously still a lot of heat travelling to the back here, so that's what all this is. So we've got a few chippings that have happened, but it does give this knife effect all around that engine, which was something I was looking for. So that's those really on board now. As I say, we've got the fuel tanks still to do, but they're very straightforward and easy to do, and I've got them here, going to paint them up, get them fixed up. But really that brings us to the end of this particular build for so far. There's just a couple of other little bits I've got to go around and just touch up, a few little cleans, a little tune up and everything, make sure all the gear is square and everything, but really that's the basics of getting this kit done. Okay, and there we go, all totally finished off. And the last couple of things we really did was obviously the aerial. We've got the line running along the top, super glue both ends, let them dry, snip them off once, because obviously they'll be a little bit hard as well. Then all we did, little bits of PVA glue onto the thread and then painted them silver, so it looks like it's got those connectors and things like that on there. And then we just added a little bit of chip into the masts that will go round. You might be able to see underneath here we've got some fuel tanks pretty heavily kicked in, because imagine that they're going to be dropped on the floor and all sorts. Those are a soft fit, so you can take them off if they wanted to at any point. Okay, so apart from that, everything else is done. Just went along, we installed a couple of the lights back onto the front, because obviously we sanded off where they were, so all we did was did the clear part, blended them in and put them in, so it's got both the landing lights on there, and really just went around and added all the little aerials and everything like that. So we've got one underneath here, underneath the belly, you might be able to see. And then obviously we've got them, the PTO tube on the side and everything else like that. To say that it's been a tricky build is somewhat of an understatement. This one's really fought me all the way as we've gone completely around this one. Obviously, just a quick recap if this is you're just watching the last part. We have the cockpit beautifully done and everything else. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit. It does fit once you've actually sanded the life out of it, and we've sanded right the way through the floor and the belly plate on this to get that one in. So the cockpit was a bit of a fiddle getting in there and everything else. So by the time we got that one in, we moved on to the wheel wells. The wheel wells didn't fit either, so they had to be sanded back and everything else, and you know, a real tight fit getting those in to the point where, you know, you could literally see daylight through them. So eventually we got those fitted in, then we went into the gun bays, and then really they were a nightmare fit as well, because there's no real clear instruction of where you fit it, how you fit it, where you cut, what you leave behind, everything else. So we did those. We moved on then to the engine, and unfortunately the engine doesn't exactly fit in. It does fit in, but it doesn't give you anywhere for exhausts or manifolds or anything else like that, so you have to dream them up yourself and put them in. We moved on then to fitting of the cowl. The cowl, well, as we said, doesn't fit at all. It's not even in scale to this kit, so really we just cut it up and used it onto the original kit part, which now looks very good, I must admit, and everything else. Then we had trouble with fibre optics, because we came along and the fibre optics, I managed to snap one somehow, and to this day I don't know how we did it in here, and trying to feed a new fibre optic cable in through this wing was a real nightmare. So at that point we're thinking, right, homeward straight now. We're just going to finish this one off and we'll move through and everything else. Then we had real trouble with the paintwork. We had trouble with the chipping. I sort of overdid it, went a bit over the top, to be honest. Then we stripped it back, did it all okay. Came back again, second time, wasn't exactly happy with it. Third time, stripped it back and everything else. And then we had a reaction with the salt wash that we actually used on this one. The salt affected with either the thinners or the paint, and literally the model turned white. Okay, so then after that happened, it was a case of, right, okay, bite the bullet, back we go again. And I went back to old school of using good old fashioned, and to be honest, this bottle here is so old, it must be at least 5 to 10 years old now, this bottle of mask oil. And I did it the old way I used to do it, which I went around and just dabbed it on, and we peeled through and everything else like that. Eventually we got it to look right, a quick wash over, a pigment scrub, and away we go. The decals were the only other little thing because they decided to disintegrate on the backing paper, but as I said, that happens all over the place and at any time. Apart from that, he says, it really has been a nice build. It's been a massive learning curve for me as well, because it wasn't straightforward by any time. So it really was a stretch to be able to say, right, okay, how are we going to put this one right? What are we going to do to it? You know, how can we improve the kit with all those little problems? And I know, you know, obviously this one's a commission as well. So, you know, there's a certain amount of pressure trying to make it look nice for the guy who's, you know, obviously paying for this particular model. And obviously to you guys as well of watching it. And as we've been going through this build, obviously the feedback on the forum about various things, and really with this one, it was one of those ones, it was always going to be completed, though I was in no doubt that I wouldn't complete this, but after a while it almost got to the point where, it sounds strange, but I was almost liking it going wrong, because I could show you different things to do. All too often you'll read in a magazine or something and they'll say, I did this, I glued this to this, and then I did that, and all the rest of it. What was nice for me to show you, literally, when it does go wrong, don't panic. You know, these things do happen. Paintwork does go bad. You know, it really does go nasty and all the rest of it. But here's how we can get around it. This is how we strip off paint, you know, and things like that. So I could show you in real time and exactly as it was happening to me, how I would go about doing it. And obviously it's all personal things, but hopefully you'll be able to pick up some tips from this and take them away and think, well look, you know, I remember seeing the guy and his went wrong and he stripped it back and it looked okay, and things like that. So there we go. That's really what the sort of point of this build was. It was supposed to be a straightforward build using LEDs and fibre optics for the first time and lighting it up. What it turned into was a real how-to do something when it goes wrong. Apart from that, I must admit, I'm really impressed with it. It was a first for me using LEDs, and a big thanks to Marcus Jellyman as well, who supplied all the electrics for this one, because to be honest, I haven't got a clue about it. He knows all these little bits and pieces and how it all works, so he just sent this stuff down to me. I cut it to length, in it goes, and he said plug it in, and it worked. So there we go. But there's lots of things I've learned. I've learned about lighting up the cockpit, the best way to do it, easy way. The first time I did it, I made a right mess of it. I should have done it a different way. So now for my next builds, I'll take that information away with me and that knowledge of how to do it and really move through with it. Playing with like fibre optics as well to get them to come out with the different thicknesses of cable. I found out that, you know, fibre optic cable, he says, just going to show you a little piece, I think, hopefully I've got it. Here we go. Fibre optic cable, it comes in like this, okay? And obviously when I was first starting out with this, you know, you're sort of thinking, well, it's going to need a lot of light to go through here and everything else. And I've got some stuff here that's really thick, right the way down to very thin. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to need a big chunk like this. Trust me, fibre optics, as long as you haven't got any fractures in the actual pipe, which are going to sort of distort the amount of light that comes through it, extremely bright. And I've gone around and we've put on another resistor onto this one. It's got 2 resistors into it to really slow down the actual flow of electricity going in, to turn down the actual LED light and make it. And then I've used sort of, you know, various clears and blacks even on there to dull them down. So you only need the thinnest bits of fibre optic to make extremely bright light. So if you're planning on doing it, don't use the big stuff, because really you won't need it. You end up with a torchlight going in there. It's one of those things. I'm going to take some photos and I'm going to do some video work after this at night with this all lit up, because it really is nice. And the thing is, in daylight you can't see the cockpit lights working as they do, because what they actually do is illuminate as well through the floor. I've got 2 LED lights on the floor as well, which light up the inside of the cockpit, but as I say, in daylight you can't really see them. It's been a great build apart from all those problems. I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and if you have, join me again next time.
easy.